Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ba.Bl podcast. So previously, I had made a post about I am Xochitl, your host and guest for the evening or the morning, whenever you happen to be watching this. So previously, I had posted how I met Eminem story, and I think there's a lot of people that listen and watch me. I don't have a ton of followers, a big following, but there's a lot of different ways that I've reached people all around the world aside from social media. Anyway, people that have watched me may have seen at least the upload of that video, may or may not have watched it or gotten into like the first 1 or 2 minutes and not really listened to the whole thing. So I'm going to be periodically posting stories about I'm going to be periodically doing stories about my experiences, and so you can get to know me. I know there's a lot of me in ballroom and in dance, but although I did start dancing at a very young age, before I wanted to be a professional dancer, I wanted to be a rapper. And when I was 15, I had this big dream of being like Ice Cube. And though I never made it, but these are my stories about what happened and how I almost got there and why I did it. So these are all helpful for people that want to be in the industry, or like young rappers or young dancers or young entertainers of any kind that are just getting started or have had some terrible experiences and want to know about what to do about it, pros and cons, do's and don'ts, etc. Tonight I want to tell a story about I think I'm going to keep it short, and I'm just going to talk about when I was about 16, 17. I think I was 17 years old, and it was my second trip to Tennessee, where I had written a notebook of songs that was the entire Lady Gaga album, her first album, with the Just Dance, Alejandro, etc. So we're going to get into that today, or whether you're at night or during the day. It's an interesting story, but I'm going to cut it short to just when it gets good. And then we're going to do a second half, because there is another thing that happened during that period of time in Tennessee that is completely separate, but it's all about my songwriting. So let's get into it. Okay, so as I said, I went to Tennessee twice. Once when I was young, about 12, 13, I think it was 13, in about 8th grade, or maybe during my 7th grade year. And then I went again in my late teens, around 17, just before my father passed away. Actually, I was 19 when he passed away. So it must have been around that time my mom had taken me, and my dad had just told me. And why there's some confusion is that my grandpa and my dad died back to back, and there's some letters and stuff that happen. So I go back and forth. So here's what happened, okay? We're out there in Tennessee, my second time around, and It's so weird how I'll be telling this story backwards, but this is just about the Lady Gaga album. Let me tell you how I got there. So, we're in Tennessee. My mom gets a car and rents a car, and so we can drive everywhere. We get a small hotel. One of her number one things that she wanted to do with me was to show me the mess that there was a tornado that had hit there, one of the biggest ones ever. And so she wanted me to see the damage and the disaster and what the people are going through. She wanted me to understand another part of the country and how different it is from what we go through here in California. So we're roaming around, and trees are down. Everything is destroyed. You can't get cross streets. The wires are all on the floor, and they're trying to get things out of the way of the road. Everything's real slow. And if you've ever been to Tennessee in the late 90s, everyth's real slow. It was country, 100% country. That was before pop had become a regular part of country music. So you turn on the radio and it was like, it just what everybody used to make fun of, which I think millennials don't really understand because, or anybody born after 2005 or 2010 doesn't really get it. Country was not pop, and it was its own thing, and people were made fun of in different parts of the country for listening to country. Everywhere else was hip hop, pop, and rock and roll and rock, but in certain parts, it was very hoedown. So that was all we could listen to. And I started to really like country. I had some friends already that were into country music. And so it was beginning to be a bigger fun thing for me now that I was like in the middle of it. But I was sort of listening to the music in a different kind of way because as I was listening to the music on the radio, I was going through the city with all of this damage. Everything was completely destroyed, and people were sullen. They were really sad. They had lost maybe some family members or pets, and their houses were without roofs, and doors were on the road. It was really bad. I don't have a lot of words for that, but it definitely made me see things differently. And so I'm really thankful that my mom took me out there to see that. Because I think it made me more genuinely concerned about people and how they're doing and where they're from and what they go through and understanding. So we go back to the hotel, and I wait for her to go to work. She's there on work for, a convention or to talk to people about what she was doing and what they're doing in California and how to make it similar in Tennessee, blah, blah, blah. So she leaves me there for quite some time. Like she's gone for hours, and all I have to do is sit in the room because the hotel was small, it was old, like everything was brown and cream colored. It was not like if you go to Florida, if you look at I don't know if you watch Golden Girls, but when they go to Florida and Seinfeld or something, and everything's like these pastel colored or these bright colored green and pink and yellow flowers and stuff like it wasn't like old people stuff. It was just brown and white, some orange. It was very sort of 70s. But so the people were nice. There was nothing to do. I couldn't walk around. I don't know anybody. It's not safe. Everything's dangerous because everything is broken. And so I can't just be out there on my own. So I sat in the room for most of the time. And so during the day, I was sleeping. And because of the time zones, I would wake up really late. And then, at night, I'd watch TV. And then at night, I'd just be sitting on my bed, writing in my journal. So I did that, I think, for 2-3 nights in a row. I think we were there for 3 days, 2 or 3 days. And so writing. And one night, I picked up my notebook. I was just laying there, and I had this great idea for a song. It just started playing in my head. If you write music, you know how that goes. And I'm working with it, and I'm thinking of lyrics, and I'm like, okay. And I stopped, and I went and I got a notebook and some paper, and I started creating and thinking about how to make it better. And then to write the music, I was writing in shapes to create the sounds. It's like my own sort of way to write music or compose, because although I do understand how to write music and I can read music a little bit, I was trained a little bit, it's not really my forte. So I was writing the music in colors and shapes, and really only had like 1 or 2 pens, like blue and black, I think. And so I wrote one song, it was Dawn, and then I wrote another song, it was Dawn, and then another song, and it was Dawn. And I'm writing down like who I think it sounds like, the songs I think it sounds like, the images I'm drawing, the fashion, like the ideas of my costumes and my makeup and my hair pieces, etc. Even down to the shoes, I'm drawing everything, the whole image, I'm making notes. And so I created the imagery that you saw that first couple of years of Lady Gaga, most of the first year that you knew of her, were my designs, but then recreated and improved by other, fashion designers. But they were already drawn. And then some of them I think I copied, because Lady Gaga was created to emulate and tribute Prince and Madonna, Michael Jackson, all of the pop icons share of the 80s, everybody that was popular in the 80s. And because I didn't think it had been done, I think I really was a big fan of Delight, and she was no longer doing music at the time, or it wasn't becoming very popular anymore. But I was a big fan of those people in that time, and I wanted to bring it back, but because it had only been a decade, I didn't think that it could be done like this year, or next year, or whatever. So I was going to hold on to it, see how long it would take me to get a name for myself and try to get it recorded. But it was all drawn up and made up by me. Even some of the things she said in interviews, I had written down the questions and the answers to interviews that she would have about the image and what it is she represents, etc. So a lot of what you see of her that first year was a really big act, and it was written and drawn up by me, all by myself, in a hotel room in Tennessee. And swear to God, like, that's not my right hand. This is my right hand. Oh, that's like forbidden. Don't do that. But yeah, so um, that's what I was doing. I think I wrote the song with her and Beyonce in it, Telephone. And I had been specific about Beyonce because, and this is going to be in a different story, where I had almost auditioned to be in Destiny's Child when we were kids. Like I said, when I was 15, I wanted to be a rapper. And just before that, I had some contacts with some producers and stuff. And because Selena was one of my favorite singers, being connected in Texas was not, you know, so far fetched. So, anyway, that will be another video. But I liked what they were doing, jotted it down, her name. I think I jotted her name down. I did a song for Alicia Keys, and I wrote Alicia Keys' name on there, and I believe it was just the hook to the New York song Concrete Jungle Ba.Bl. So there's some, like, oh, what was written first, what was it? And because it was such a tribute to things that had been done in the past and artists that had already been, that I have been pushed back a lot and shoved under the rug because they're like, you got this from here, you got this from there. But most of the music and the creations images, most of them were original creations of mine. I do know that I did copy a lot of the 80s styles and even some of the 90s fashions, and put them into some of my work over the years. And I always credit the people that I want to emulate or that I'm tributing. At the end of that notebook with the Lady Gaga album, which described Lady Gaga, the name, and what it meant and where I got it from. So let me explain this to you, because here's something you may have never heard before. You've heard her descriptions and her explanations for many years, which are wrong in their lies. So let me tell you where I got it from. And I hate actually talking about it because it has something to do with somebody I don't talk to anymore. And she likes to like jab at me that, it should have been me. And I was like, I wrote it, like it was never going to be you. But anyway, there's this sort of back and forth trade thing that we go through about who's what and whatever because of the name that I created and why. So Lady Gaga, I had a cousin that I used to babysit, and she was such a whiny brat. I mean, she was mean and evil. She used to hit people with a baseball bat, a plastic baseball bat, and kick things and throw things at people and bite you and scratch you. She was evil, an evil, evil baby, and she takes great pride in that. But as she grew up, she became a teenager. She is like explained that she didn't know where she was at. She didn't want to be called a little girl. She wasn't like a baby anymore, and she wasn't like old enough to be called ma'am. But she wanted to be addressed with respect by her friends. All her friends were boys, so she was really like, what should I have them call me? And I think we were like, well, you're not really a woman. Kind of like the Britney Spears song, right? You're not a girl, not yet a woman. But she's like, I said, well, you're just a lady. Like in old times, they would have just called you a lady. And we laughed about it. So when I was thinking of a name, I was thinking lady. And because she thought she was a little bit matured, she was not. And I still saw her as sort of a bratty little whiner. And she spoke high pitched, as a lot of Mexican girls do. It's one of her stereotypes, but she's sort of high pitched and really like whining and always upset about something, and tries to take on like the tough attitude, with it. And so I was like, whenever we made fun of her behind the back, we would go like, wah, 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 wah. And so instead of Lady Wah Wah, I called her Lady Gaga, like Goo Goo Gaga. She's always like Goo Goo Gaga. But she was still only about 12 or something, so she wasn't quite an adult yet. So I could call her like a lady, but she was still like still acting like a baby and kind of immature. Anyway, that's a really deep explanation. But that's where it came from, and that explanation is written in that book as well. It's in handwriting with a pen, and I signed it at the end. And at the end, I wrote what I would like to do with the album, which was that if, I didn't think that it could come out. Do you see that? Oh, that's weird. I didn't think that it could come out until at least another decade. I didn't think anybody would be ready for it. It's too soon. The 80s is, we have to do it when 80s is considered oldies. It always takes like 20, 25 years before people do that in the radio stations. So it was a little bit too soon. We're still in the 90s. And so I proposed that it could be recorded, but it shouldn't be released until at least 10 years. And that if I was too old or if they didn't think I was right for it, as a songwriter, I'd be happy to collect residuals and be underground, that I would take a different name as a songwriter. And I wanted to do everything underground. I don't know. I sort of didn't mind just being behind the scenes and being a songwriter, but you do grow up as a dancer wanting to be on stage. And I have a pretty good singing voice, so I knew I could accomplish it. But one of my problems was with writing some of those songs were on piano, and I did, like I said, write the music, and it does state that it has to be on the piano. I was hearing a piano in my head. I was also hearing somebody connecting to me on the piano. Like, it clearly wasn't just me. I was like, I need help. And when you're in Tennessee, nobody talks about this, but when you're in Tennessee, if you're in a hotel, pretty much everybody is there for music. Everybody. And they're not doing anything else. So if you're in the middle of the night, if anybody else is awake and listening to the bigger, broader mental spaces or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what it's called, okay? But if you've expanded, or if you connect to anybody that's awake, usually it'll be somebody experienced with dealing with musicians or an actual musician themselves. So I was coming up with a pianist, and it happened to be a young one. And I said, "Oh, who are you?" And they said, "Oh, I'm Elton John's protege." And I was like, okay, whatever. It's like, nice to meet you. But I was very polite in this little telepathic conversation that you're not supposed to talk about. But so it went away. I finished the song. And, who knows if that was true or not. But here's what happens. At the end of the book, I write, that I'm willing to be underground, but I want to marry, and that I want to marry Michael Jackson and move to Mars, right? And whatever. So I sign it, I write my phone number, I wrote my address, boom, Ba.Bl, closed it, put it under my pillow, and I was so mentally exhausted that I went to sleep. And I woke up in the morning, or later in the next day was checkout. So my mom said, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be back just before checkout. So be ready, have all your stuff packed. I get up late. It's like 1 o'clock. We got late checkout. So I'm going to take a shower really quick. And when I got up and went to take a shower, shut the door to the shower, I got out of the shower. The door to my hotel room was completely open, and there were two people in my hotel room. They were not my mother, and we didn't travel there with anybody, and I didn't know who they were. I looked out the door, and then I looked at them, and now I am in my towel, young girl. Don't need to say it, but I was a virgin. Like, I did not ever plan on being in a hotel with a grown man ever at that point. And I didn't know who it was. And I go, why would my mom allow somebody in my room while I was in the shower, knowing that I could come out like half naked? So I'm in my towel. It's a small towel, didn't cover all the way. And I'm really shocked. And I look at him and I'm like, who are you? Who the hell are you? And he's holding my notebook from under my pillow. I look under my pillow and he's messed up my bed. And he's just holding it like I had caught them before they were leaving. And the second, it was this old, bald guy. I couldn't tell you if he was white or Italian or whatever. But he was bald, lighter skin tone, obviously, and fat, like a big belly, But he wasn't that much taller, maybe 5'6", 5'7", and aggressive. He was looking at me like this, like, what are you gonna do? And I told him, give him my notebook back, that's mine. And I said, what the hell are you doing here? I'm in a towel. So I reach and I grab the lamp, like I'm gonna hit you with the lamp over your head. And he pulls his pocket, like they used to in the old days, like this, right? And it's like a stupid thing, like they're doing it, but you can't tell really because some guns are really small. And he could actually have one, but why wouldn't he pull it out to let me know, right? So you can't be sure. And I said, look, I don't have any clothes on. Give me my notebook. And he said, no, what are you going to do about it? And I said, give it to me now. You barged in. I'm going to call the police. If you don't give me my notebook, I'm going to call the police and have somebody come and get you. And he said, look, I just want to tell you, I think he told me his name. I don't remember it. I was in a fog, like the shock and the brain faint happens. I'm like in shock, right? And I don't know what's going on. I'm in a towel. I have no clothes on, naked under here. And he's in there with this little scrawny, next to nothing girl with a blonde wig cut like this, like short, bob cut wig. And she has a star painted on her face, like she was there to prove that she was the artist that I needed for this album. And I'm like, who are you? And she introduced herself as Stephanie such and such. I just remember her as Stephanie. That's what she said. And I go, and why are you with him? She said, I told you I'm the girl on the piano that I talked to you last night. It was on the piano. And she said, I'm Elton John's protege. And I was like, then, and why are you with him? You had to know that coming into a hotel room somebody else is staying is wrong. What are you doing here with him? And he's standing there next to her. And And she said, I didn't know that you didn't know that we were going to be here. She acted like she didn't know anything. And she said, and he said, just ask her for permission. Because I think I said, you can't just take somebody's stuff that's stealing. You can't just have somebody's music. It's worth a lot of money. Do you understand? And she said, I'm sorry. And then the guy says, just ask her for permission then. And she looks at me with her hands on her side, to her side, and she says, can I, or I think she went like this, can I please have those songs? But she's just a kid. I mean, I was just a kid, but she's just a little kid, you know, and she was asking me for permission to take my music away from me. And I said, no. No, you can't. You can't just have something that's not yours. And so the guy stuck me with this little gun. He stuck me. He said, yes, you can. He said, whether you like it or not, we're leaving with these. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I was like, yeah, I went to grab the notebook again. My towel almost fell off. I said, okay, I get it. There's nothing I can do. You're not going to wait for me to get dressed. You were in here to steal it. I caught you. I can't beat up a man half naked. This is ridiculous. I was being like somewhat normal about the thing, like it happens every day. And I look at her and I said, okay, I don't know what the situation is, how much danger you're in or how much danger I'm in. I think I went to grab the phone then to hit him across the head, but he thought I was gonna call the police. So I grab it and I start swinging, and he pushes me against the dresser, unturns and hangs it up. So we got in a little bit of a physical altercation over it. And I went back to her and I said, look, it's obvious you guys are going to take this. I'm not going to let you hurt me. Okay? You'll probably have to shoot me dead. But if you're going to do this album, you're not old enough. And I said, what are your plans with your life? And she said, oh, well, I'm going to go to college for music. And I was like, you're going to go to college for music? Okay. And I go, so it's going to be many years before you can even get started on this album. It shouldn't even be recorded until almost 2010 for another 10 years. You can record it after college if I don't find you guys first and figure out a way to get it back. But if you do it now, you're not going to succeed. And I said, and the only reason I'm telling you is because it's important that my music makes it. I don't want to just give it to some random person where it's just going to fall flat and end up in the garbage. That's not what I do it for. And she goes, okay, well, I can do it after I graduate. And I was like, okay, you're going to graduate college. And I was like, well, good luck. And I gave her a hug and my towel. And I said, I want you to be careful. I can't help you once you leave that door, because I don't know who you are. And she just she like gulped, and she said, okay. And they left. And then I called the front desk and I said, do you see somebody coming down the steps right now? Somebody's leaving my hotel room. They look like this. And she said, no. And I said, are there cameras in this hotel? And she said, no. And I said, well, how would I know if somebody came into my hotel room? And she said, unless somebody saw it. And I said, do you see anybody now? And I stayed on the phone with her for like 5 minutes. Do you see them now? Do you see them now? Do you see them now? And she said, no. I said, nobody's leaving out the front. Is there a back way? And she said, no. I said, then how are you not seeing them? And I said, listen, I want you to call the police and tell them somebody has barged into one of the hotel rooms. And then my mom, as I was telling the front desk to call the police, my mom comes in the door. So the guy leaves. My mom comes in the door. And I look at my mom. I said, did you see the guy? Like, you can't. There's one elevator, one staircase. I think it was a staircase. It wasn't an elevator or something. And I was like, did you see anybody in the hallway? She said, no. And I said, how could you not? You didn't see any. There's nobody. Nobody? Nobody. So then I did. I thought that they were in the next room, maybe. And that's how it was so close to me. But nobody saw them. And I asked if anybody was in the hotel of that description, and the front desk lady said no. And there was no way to ask anybody that was there at a different time and a different day. So I told my mom the story, and I was in a big panic, and she said, boy, you need to see a therapist. And she said, Xochitl, you're delusional. There's nobody in this room. Nobody was here. Are you okay? I know you've been up all night, but maybe you're sick. And she started like acting like I was insane. I was like, no, you don't understand. I said, do you remember that just before you fell asleep, I was writing in my journal? She says, I don't know, Xochitl. I was so tired. I just went to sleep. I said, Mom, I asked you a question before you went to sleep about Spanish stuff, something in Spanish, because I was writing something in Spanish. And she's like, something, maybe, but I was so tired. I don't really remember anything. I just, passed out. I put that notebook that you gave me under my pillow, and I started doing this to the blankets and the pillows. Look, it's not here. It's not here. We tore the bed apart, flipped it over. It wasn't there. I said, Mom, you don't know how much money this is worth. It's a whole album. I wrote the whole thing. It's the whole thing. I was describing, and the more I talked about it, the more upset I got, and the more she thought I needed to see a therapist. So I decided to shut my mouth and stop talking about it. She said, Xochitl, if you're that good, you could do it again, right? And I was like, oh, okay. Good point. I'll do one better. I'll make a better one. And there was no question like, oh God, how am I going to do that? I was just going to. So then, as you've seen in my previous thing, I wrote the Eminem album, Recovery. I know that was years later, but a couple years later. So, yeah, I was not feeling threatened that I couldn't do it anymore, but I knew I had just lost a ton of money and a big opportunity to make it on my own. I didn't necessarily give it away, but I was gonna run through all my connections to see if maybe anybody would be able to find out who the person was that took it, if they got a deal, when they got a deal. I wanted them to be aware that I had already done it, so I could come in and say, remember when I asked you about it? That's the thing. I tried. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't sue. I didn't even know who to sue. But she did say that she was Elton John's project. And then who believes that, right? But so she said she was 14 years old. And I tried to do the timeline in my mind, it didn't sink for a long time. First of all, I didn't know how old she was, but I think that she recorded the album in 2006 or somewhere around 2006, because I then went to Las Vegas the day after Prince's last concert in Vegas, and everybody said that he was already on a plane out. He was not there anymore. So I was like, when I was trying to look for Prince, I wanted to meet him, you know, because I missed the concert. But I was sitting down in the Paris Hotel, in the bar. We were going to go to the club there. And my song plays with another person's voice on the sound system in that bar, which is like the whole lobby area. And I asked the bartender, I panicked, and I asked the bartender, where did you get this song? Who's playing the song? Where's the song playing from? Do you have a system in the back? Do you play it, or is it in a bigger system in the hotel, or where do you get this music? And he was like, yeah, it's in a big system. It's its own radio station chosen by Prince's radio station on this system, whatever. I was like, but like, where did the song come from? How is it on Prince's radio station if it has not been released yet? He said, what do you mean? How do you know that? And I said, I wrote that song, and it's not supposed to be released for another 4 years. And he's like, look at me like I'm crazy. And I said, do you know if Prince is still in town? Is he here? Does he have control over that? I was like asking question after question. He thought I was nuts. And I was like, no. He said, maybe you need a drink. And I was like, I'm not buying drinks. They're buying drinks. I was there with people who were buying drinks. And they said, Xochitl, I'll buy you a drink. It's fine. And I was like, no. I've had enough. I'm fine. A guy comes over and he says, I'll buy her a drink. Or he's like he's over sitting next to a Prince lookalike is what I thought. I didn't think he was really Prince. He had like sunglasses on or whatever. So they're sitting across the bar listening to this, and they're going, and it's just this older white guy and this Prince lookalike. There were Prince lookalikes everywhere in that hotel. 4, 5, 6 of them I saw. So you don't know, right? And this guy talks to the bartender and tells him to buy me a drink. So he gives me a drink. And as I'm drinking, I'm losing my sights. It's all fuzzy, right? I had been roofied. And this guy comes up to me and he says he's Kevin Costner. I don't know who the guy is. I couldn't see him except his blue ass eyes, excuse my language. They're so beautiful. And I don't, if it was Kevin Costner, he's a very handsome man, at least if you're drugged. But I was looking at him from across the bar, so I kind of knew what he looked like. But he came up to me and he said, do you want to see my ID? And I said, yeah, show me ID. And then I looked at the reason why I knew I was roofied. It wasn't that I had drinking too much. Drank. But I looked at the ID, couldn't read it, couldn't see the face. Fuzzy, blurred. And I was like, and then I asked my cousin next to me to read it. I said, what's that say? Does that say Kevin Costner? She's like, I don't know. So she didn't know, and I don't know. I don't know if she was playing with me or lying to me or whatever. So because I didn't feel like she was being honest with me that day, I stopped trusting her, and that's a different side story. But I don't know if the bartender roofied me, if my cousin roofied me, if Kevin Costner roofied me, but I was done. was passing out. I actually asked him, I got really mad and was like, and what? So now I suppose you have a room that you want me to go meet you and your friends in, right? And he said, no. And I said, but you want me to go with you to your room? He goes, no. And I go, so okay, so that he didn't do this to me then, or then what's the purpose, right? So he just said, I just wanted you to know that you're beautiful, blah, blah, blah. He says, really nice to meet you. And he gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek and he left. And then I went to the restroom, really fuzzy. I couldn't stand up or walk straight. I was getting mad at everything. And I was like, let's go. Everybody finish up. Let's go. I'm done here. I'm really upset. I was trying to tell them my story about what happened. And we walk out. I'll tell you stories of when I met Prince in another video, but in another episode. But so I basically did not figure it out that night either. But I did make a pretty big to-do about it so that there was some whispers and talk about that somebody else wrote that song. And YouTube existed already, 2006, in case you didn't know. Some kids think it was around forever. So YouTube was around. And I looked it up, my songs, the name of my songs, and Lady Gaga, the name, right? And it came up, this girl performing on stage, I think it was in Vegas, in this little outfit, two-piece outfit. But she had brown hair at the time. It was her regular hair. And she was doing my song, and I was just watching her, and I was like, that doesn't look like the girl because she has brown hair. The girl that I met was blonde, but maybe it was a wig, right? I thought it was a wig at the time. But so it couldn't tell because she had brown hair on stage. And I was like, that, I told them they could record it, but I also told them not to release it. Like, it's too soon to release that song. Nobody's listening. There was no views. Nobody liked it. Nothing. It wasn't getting anywhere. And I knew that it was because it was too early. The people aren't into that. So I didn't know what to do about making that more like known. I couldn't sue. All I had was my mom. The hotel had no record. I did call when I went home to see if there was anybody from a different day, working on a different day that I was there. They could tell me if that description fit anybody that checked in. And I didn't get any answers. So I don't know. I think the biggest mistake I made there was that I didn't actually call the police because I'm not from Tennessee. There was nothing I could do. And to get a lawyer on music that you don't have any recording of is impossible. So we left there. And like I said, the end of that trip is a completely different story because there was a different meeting on our way out of town. And there was a little bit of a fight between me and my mom over this. So I will say that it sort of ended with me and my mom talking about what's going on with my dad and how sick he was. So, yeah. And that's it. So I just wanted to come on here, tell everybody who I am. My name is Xochitl MLPZ, formerly Lopez with a Z. And I wrote several albums that I didn't get any credit for. There were a bunch of people on the thank you note in the back of these albums, and I'm not one of them. I checked the album. I read those thank yous 50,000 times, just wondering why my name's not on there. But also understanding because then I could sue, and I didn't sue, so I didn't get any credit. I didn't get any money. I didn't get any residuals. Nobody knows who I am, but a Mexican American so obviously wrote those songs that you're so fond of on Lady Gaga's first album. And it's very obvious because two of the songs are Latino. Like, you can tell it was written by a Latina. I mean, some of it is in different languages. So I don't speak French, right? But I put the word, when I wrote it down, I put the word in English, and on top I put in French. And then I was gonna go home and look it up in books to see what the word I needed was. But so now we know that she speaks a little bit of French, and she added that in. And she was somewhat of Elton John's protege. So I don't know if really who I met was actually the person we know of as Lady Gaga today. She just went by the name Stephanie. And so it's possible that I met her when she was 14. And they did actually steal from me, but they can claim that they asked for permission and that I gave it to them, although they pretended that they were in gunpoint. It could have been a real gun, and I was in a very vulnerable situation where I was in a towel and there was nothing I could do. I asked them to wait for me, and he looked at me like I'm nuts. They were leaving, and they were taking my notebook, is what he said. So, it was illegal. It's like grand theft, in my opinion. I don't know what else to call it. I don't know what it's called, but I can't really prove it either. So that's the end of my story, guys. You can like this, dislike this, comment on this, definitely, because I do want to know what you have to say about it. If you're interested, if you believe me, if you don't believe me. I'm not out here trying to destroy careers, but I think with what's going on today in politics of the United States of America, it's really important to tell the untold stories of people of color, more specifically right now, Mexicans or Mexican Americans, as I am. Because they are trying to erase history, and they've been working on that for many years, not just in political history or history books, but in music and TV, in film, and many other different industries. And I'm one of possibly many that have been shoved under the rug. And unfortunately, I think what happens in this kind of thing is that they try to get rid of you in a lot of different ways, and they make your life very difficult in a lot of different ways. So a lot of which probably committed suicide or were kidnapped or killed or both. So I'm just gonna consider myself lucky that I am still alive, and I worked really hard to make sure that people knew who I was, and there was a lot of people who were aware of my existence, period, that I exist. And I always tell people where I am. So it's very difficult for people to get me down and hurt me. A lot of other things have happened to me in my past that will come up in some of the other episodes that were very scary and dangerous. And it was all concerning the music and whether or not I was gonna make it or take some deal. So if you're still interested after this 55 minutes or an hour, depending on the commercials, subscribe, like, share it with friends, talk about it with each other, and thank you for watching.